Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Horn Call podcast. My name is James Bolden. I'm the International Horn Society's publication editor and your host. This episode is for the month of July 2024, and I'm really excited to share this interview with our wonderful guest, Dr. Monica Martinez. Monica is the assistant professor of horn at the University of Texas, Rio Grande Valley, and is also on the International Horn Society's Advisory Council. Just a note or two about today's episode. At the time that we recorded it, which was earlier in the spring, she had just returned with her studio from performing at the Mid-South Horn Workshop at Oklahoma State University. And from our conversation, you can tell that the performance and the whole studio's experience there went really well. And her enthusiasm and excitement about all things horn and building a studio culture and recruiting are just infectious. And I hope that you really enjoy this episode as much as I did. She is full of great ideas, drawing on her past experiences. And as you will hear, she has had a lot of experiences leading her to where she is today, being a successful performer and teacher. So without further delay, here's my conversation with Monica Martinez. Thanks so much for being here today. And as always with our guests, it's lovely to hear about how you got your start on the horn and what your musical upbringing was like, and maybe any early inspirations you had, either horn playing or musical or otherwise. That's always interesting to me. So why don't you give us a little bit of that?
Right. Thanks again for having me. This for me is just one of those, full circle moments because I obviously remember those videos that you would do when I was younger and I would watch, and so it's like to finally feel seen, in a way. It's like, wow, so somebody wants to know about things. I didn't want to play horn, sad to say, in the very beginning. I wanted to play clarinet. It was slightly different where I went to school, and in that area, I'm from where I teach, so another kind of full circle moment. But there at the time, they didn't do testing either. It was just kind of like, if you want to be in band, you show up and you say what you want to play, and they would pretty much give full consideration to that. So me and my friends, of course, like, oh, let's all play like the girliest, smallest thing. So we're like, okay, clarinet, good, done, right? So we're all kind of taking turns, going up there to say what we want to play. And I was like, okay, I want to play clarinet. And, I just remember them saying, all right, great, but it's going to cost this much, and you have to get reeds, and you have to do this and this and this. And for us, that just wasn't an option, like for the family to have to do that kind of cost. So it was like, well, no, so like my mom was like, no, you can't play that. And we kind of asked, well, is there something that you guys can provide for her that she can play? And they kind of said, well, yeah, we have a horn. And I'm like, just what's that? And then when they kind of showed me what it was, I'm like, ew, that's the ugliest thing I've ever seen. Like, I don't, why? But like I also had to ride the bus, so I was just thinking, that's going to be a disaster to go on the bus. And it was, but it was
it's
also
not
one of those
it's not an inconspicuous instrument. It's very like, what is that in this odd looking case? Yeah.
Hey, but for the most part, I usually had my own seat because nobody wanted to, I had no room. So, but no, yeah. So, but thankfully, I did. I think it was, like a natural thing. I always made first chair and all that kind of stuff. Sad to say, even within the first few months of playing, I think that's about the time that like rollerblades came out, and I ended up breaking my left wrist. So when I first started playing, I had to learn kind of incorrectly because my cast wouldn't reach all the
Oh
way.
no.
So with my left hand, I was able to play with the thumb with the trigger, but I had to do this part over here with my right hand.
Oh, that's
So
amazing.
so that's kind of how I learned how to play in the very beginning. But tuning didn't matter so much in the beginning.
So
But once I
you were
was,
kind of bracing the horn with your left hand with the cast, and then
yeah,
you were reaching across the body of the instrument with your right hand to like to
right,
move the valves. That's pretty amazing.
exactly. But yeah, and the other thing is, I didn't have like a horn, teacher. I had trumpet teachers, but they were still able to kind of help me out with like, hey, listen to these people,
Hmm.
do this. And that helped to really get my ear into what horn should sound like. Um, as far as, musical training, I didn't, again, with my family, no one was musically trained. My grandfather was the earliest, I guess, exposure to music. He was blind, but not trained. It was just he played piano and he played, harmonica just for the love of doing it. And I
Hmm.
think that was kind of that start. Like, you do that because you love it. And of course, if you have the training, awesome. But that was just my first exposure. And then my brother, who's 4 years older than me, he was the first one in the whole family to kind of like go into band and things like that. So I saw what that was like. I'm like, oh, it's really neat to be a part of something, that kind of culture and the environment. So that was where I was like, yes, that's kind of what I want to do. And
What did he play,
or
your
be a
brother?
part of. He played trombone.
Okay.
Yeah, so I didn't want to play trombone, but what's funny is later on when I taught middle school and high school, we had at the school where I was at, we didn't have any horn players, so I had to play trombone like pretty much that whole year, but I actually was pretty good. And I was thinking, hey, maybe,
That's funny.
and then
Yeah. So for anybody that doesn't know, you grew up in the southern part of Texas, which is like it's just a
right.
massive state. I mean, takes like days to drive across the entire state of Texas. So what
That's
was
why it took us so long to
yeah,
get to
exactly, to
Oklahoma.
get to the Mid-South Horn Workshop. So what what was that part of Texas like? Because, there's North Texas, there's the middle part of Texas, there's South Texas. Maybe give us a little bit of insight into, what it was like growing up there.
Right. Well, so I was born in Brownsville, very tip of, South Texas. I think, just knowing that and it's weird because when you're young, you don't realize that things are different until you leave the area, you know.
Right. Yep.
So I did again, I really had no idea of how things were even either less or more until I was gone, maybe
Hmm.
for grad school. And then I kind of started to realize like, oh wow, like yeah, we don't have private lesson teachers here, and we don't have those kind of extra things that probably could help this area.
Hmm.
And 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 also the other thing, when I was down here, I didn't realize how because it's different when you're Hispanic and you're from this area. You're surrounded with people that look just like you, so you don't realize how that is different either until
Hmm.
you're gone. So I didn't experience a lot of those things until after I had left, and then I was like, whoa, I'm the only one that looks just like me, or
Right.
and here when I play in regional orchestras here, um the other thing that I didn't realize when I was younger is that how I'm one, if not the one of like one or two females as well. I think that changes as you start to go more, into Texas.
Mm.
Um, so that was nice to see. Like, wait, there's way more females when I go outside of this area in brass,
Hmm.
versus down here. I'm kind of still maybe one of two. So that's the other thing is that it's though there are young female players that start out, they just don't tend to continue. So
Hmm.
that's one of those things to kind of that we're slowly trying to change, right? And it helps that they get to see that it's possible to do these things.
Well, exactly. Well, it
But yeah,
sounds like you're doing a great job of being, a force for change and being a role model for those players to see someone doing maybe something that they hadn't thought that they could do, but now that they see someone doing it, they're like, oh, that's like something that's a possibility.
yeah, and also, it the other thing is change, especially in this area, like it's not instant. And
Right.
it's probably like that at most places. Sometimes it's an instant thing, but here it always seems like it takes us a little bit longer to 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 have some kind of change like that. So so for example, with the private lesson stuff, it's not that we don't have people that want to teach and want to do it. It's just
Hmm.
that the reality is that it's not something that's, as affordable to
Right.
most families here. And even if they can afford it, there's way more other things that they need to spend their money on
Right.
than maybe private lessons. So that's why, even though that's still a thing here, I still try to make those opportunities somewhat available to the studio. Like, even though I'll have maybe one or two that might get, one or two students here or there, but if they can't get that experience that way, then they're going to get it in the studio. So
Right.
having
Teaching
them.
each other, and yeah, yeah.
Right, exactly. Because that's something I know when I was starting out that I wish I would have done more of, but part of that is that I didn't. It was hard to get into that because it just wasn't as wanted, I guess. I don't
Right.
know.
No, no. Well, and it's a thing of, um, if you don't know that this is something that one can do, it's hard to even know like where to ask. And it's like, oh, do I have to ask my parents for money for this? And then it
Right.
becomes a whole thing. Um, so you played horn in high school, and then when it came time to sort of think about, okay, am I going to go to college? And if I go to college, what do I want to major in? Was that What was that decision like, and what was it? Was it difficult to sort of convince people that like, hey, music is something that I can do and that I can actually, make a living doing this? Because sometimes that's a difficult conversation to have with parents and loved ones. It's like, no, you can actually do this. It's a real thing.
Right. It's a constant conversation. No,
Exactly.
but
Yeah.
it's just one of those things. I didn't, it wasn't until maybe like middle of high school where I kind of started to think about music being, some kind of career. I wanted to be a veterinarian
Oh,
when I
wow.
was younger. Yeah, and almost to the point where I was volunteering, at the zoo here, like on the summers. Like I was all in
Hmm.
for like animal, all those things. And but the problem came where I just became too emotional when my pets would die.
Oh, no.
so, so so my mom, kind of had to have that hard conversation with me and say, sometimes it's not a bad thing. It's almost a good thing that you have to put animals, to sleep, or you have to do these things in order to help them. And she's like, if you can't handle those those kinds of things,
Hmm.
then this might not be a path for you. And I was just kind of like, you're right. So I mean, I've always had that love for animals, and even throughout my schooling, like up until the time that I probably started teaching here, I was constantly on the side, either working at kennels or as a dog walker or doing anything with animals, because that is still like, a deep kind of passion for
Hmm.
me. But yeah, so once I kind of made that switch, in my mind, like, okay, well, what else can I, do I love, and what can I kind of do? And I was like, well, I love horn. I started to take it probably more seriously around, my junior year
Hmm.
of high school. So I figured, okay, I'm just gonna stick with this, and but I still didn't know exactly what I wanted to do. I just knew I love my horn. I love to play.
Hmm.
And I always explain to my students, because it is common that when they start here, that it's kind of that same thing. Like, they love to play, but they don't
Hmm.
really know, do I want to be a band director? And if anything, most of them are like, no, I don't want to. I don't want to do. And so I always try to tell them, okay, well, let's kind of see what it is you like, and not force it. I think it takes time, and you do, kind of gravitate towards certain things, especially the more exposure you have to, teaching and playing and all those things. But
Hmm.
yeah, so once I decided that that's kind of what I wanted to do, luckily, since I had made state, I was able to get a scholarship to go, so that helped, because I
Uh-huh.
knew that being able to afford college was not possible either. So I knew I had to do as much as I can with my grades so that I
Hmm.
got grants and all those kinds of things. So encourage that even now with students in high school or even middle school that I see. I tell them start now, like start doing, especially if you know that finances are going
Mm-hmm.
to be one of those factors. Um, but yeah, and then my brother, since he was in music, he really loved soundtracks, and he
Uh-huh.
would always listen to that. So that was kind of my exposure to that, and I was like, wow, wow,
Mm-hmm.
so of course having that dream of like, oh, I want to either be a part of that or just be able to play with that kind of like, passion and it wasn't until I think once I was already in my undergrad that then I started to gravitate towards, oh well so I did my undergrad at Texas A&M Kingsville
Mm-hmm.
with Dr. Sholtis and I knew instantly that I didn't want to be a band director
Mm-hmm.
but part of that just had to do with maybe not understanding things and then later on that goal kind of shifted where well I know that in my heart I'm probably I love to see what she was doing, being able to play and to teach. I was like,
Mm-hmm.
ooh, there's this nice balance there. Like I
Right.
like that because I think deep down inside I knew, well, I don't know if I could fully be one or fully be the other, but to have that balance of doing both was nice. And
Mm-hmm.
then but yeah, so it was interesting to kind of figure out what path I wanted to do. And then a personal goal, like I was saying, is that I wanted to teach at least 1 year of every level. So like, elementary, middle school, high school.
Oh my
I was
goodness.
lucky.
Wow.
Yeah, I was lucky that I was able to do ed and performance at the same time.
Okay. Yeah.
So
What was that track like? Because I know that both are very rigorous programs at most places. I mean, and there are certainly music education majors that play really, really well, but sometimes it's hard to balance like, oh, I have to learn bassoon fingerings now for my woodwinds class, and then I have to practice for like my horn for concerts and recitals. So how did you manage juggling both of those things?
I didn't. No, no, I'm just kidding. It's just, I since deep down inside I'm like a very persistent person, and I have like when I put my mind to something, like I'm gonna try so hard to do it. So I think having that kind of mentality helped to push.
Mm-hmm.
Like I always had a certain goal in mind, and
Mm-hmm.
I knew like my initial thing was like I have to finish in 4 years because I knew that was almost impossible. Because it just and it kind of is sometimes because we just like have so much and we have to pile on so many hours. Like I was taking 18, 19 hours sometimes just to complete that goal. So again,
Right.
I'm just crazy. So I
Uh,
don't recommend it. But that was just kind of what I, wanted and had to do. It took me 4.5, so I did end up staying an extra semester to enable, in order to complete all of that. But yeah, it was great. I think my initial thing was the ed was supposed to be, my backup
mhm.
thing. And what's interesting because I actually do kind of encourage that in the studio, even for the ones that maybe don't know whether they want to do ed,
Mhm.
I tell them it's a really great backup to have because that happened several times in my life where I had to stop school and go back and teach. So
Mhm.
that's when I was able to throw in that goal of, well, I'm going to teach at least 1 year of every level. Also just kind of to see what it was like and to see if it is a fit or not, because even though
Mhm.
in our mind we have an idea of what we want to do, like I just
Mhm.
kind of was like, well, let me do this, see what it's like. And my first, and probably the one I thought the most polar opposite, elementary, that was the first one that I did. So
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, but you know what? And even though when I was teaching, I'm like, yep, this isn't for me. But at the same time, I learned so much from doing that, and
Mhm.
I realized like that I was just like maybe a very serious person at the time, and they helped me to just kind of chill out a little bit and to
Kids tend to do that. Yeah.
yeah, well that and you don't realize that they're very smart and
Hmm.
observant.
Yes,
So
yes.
so that was the other thing, is like I needed to stop assuming, certain things, and I was just like, wow. And they just really opened my eyes to a lot of things. So even though, that was short-lived, I don't regret any of my time spent. And it was definitely like I learned a lot from that time. And I was lucky later on when I was in the middle of grad school that, I had to take some time. I have such a weird, kind of interesting path that I could go on for hours, and some
No,
people
that
are
it's interesting to me. So did you so well, I had a couple questions if that's okay.
sure, go for it.
So the first one is, yeah, it's clear that you are like super motivated and driven and you have, these goals and plans and things. So where do you feel like that came from? Do you think that came from anything, from your parents or upbringing, or was there a role model or somebody that you kind of were like, yeah, I want to do what that person's doing?
Right. I mean, I think it just came, I mean, obviously directly from my parents, because that is kind of that first exposure of like you have to work hard
Hmm.
for everything. And especially as I got older, I realized, wow, things aren't as easy, and that you do always have to do just a little bit more to stand out and to get things done, and being very proactive and things like that. And but for sure, my parents, and what I appreciate so much, because it is um not, I guess I can't say specifically in Hispanic culture, because I'm sure it's like that in other cultures as well. But there's this kind of like, we they don't understand when you say you're going to study music, like what does that mean? you know so they're like,
Yes,
well, you're
yeah, yeah.
like, how are you going to survive doing that? So
Right.
I'm I don't think that my family even really understood what it meant for me to study music, but my parents were always very supportive of my choices, and they were
Hmm.
always there for me. So I'm like eternally grateful for that, because that I sometimes, or unfortunately, lots of times I have students where that's not the case. So they
Hmm.
have to continue to fight for proving that what they love to do is what's best for them. Do you know what I mean?
Right. And then it's going to
So
have value later on. The question I often hear students is, well, what am I going to do with this degree? Or what am I supposed to do
right.
with this? So yeah, I,
Yeah.
I, I
And I
sympathize.
and I think it's good to see and try to figure out what all the possibilities are. It doesn't have to be so black and white and be like band director, performer. Like
Hmm.
there's so many other other, like,
Yes. Yep.
areas of things to do. And especially those of them that are, I have friends that are really good at, like, grant writing, and they're and they do
Hmm.
a lot with more of the admin side with nonprofits. And that's just so great. Like I wish I had that kind of capability as well, like, but yeah.
Well, I'm sure if
It's
you put your mind to it, it sounds like you could do just about anything you wanted to do. And so I was going to go back to, so you mentioned making All-State in Texas, and for anybody that doesn't know, that's like a big deal. So I mean, Texas is a massive state, and to even make like an all region and something, there's this tiered system in Texas of you make a region band, and then the region band auditions for the state band and that sort of thing. So that's a really big deal. So it sounds like you were already playing at a good level before you went to college. Um, so you completed your undergrad, and then did you were teaching a little bit after that? You went and got some teaching jobs.
Right. So the short here, let's do the short version, and
Okay.
then you can try to ask. Yeah, and those that know that it, unfortunately for me, like nothing was ever easy or with just a one path as much as I wanted it to be. It was kind of like and then and then you stop again, and then but going. But so okay, I graduated, and then did my undergrad, finished in 4.5. I graduated a semester off, meaning most of the time you hope to graduate in May, and then it
Mhm.
makes it so much easier to either go to grad school right after or start a job right after. Since I graduated right in the middle, in the
Mhm.
fall, uh, threw me off slightly because if you want scholarships and if you want things like that, if you want to go on, that kind of didn't work out. So I worked um, for that during that spring semester at JCPenney.
Mm-hmm.
And I worked there. And then once I was ready, I started applying to grad school. I was very adamant that I had to go to UT Austin to study with Pat.
Mm-hmm.
But, unfortunately, I didn't get in. So I was like, oh, I think at the time I was just like, my life is over. My path is gone. But so I had to learn very early on, like, you need to keep pushing, and if you want something, it's not gone. You have to come up with something else, and then you
Mm-hmm.
can go back on that path, right? So I knew, okay, I have my ed degree. I'm going to teach for a year,
Mm-hmm.
and then I'm going to try again. I'm going to try for grad school again. So that's what I did. I taught elementary. By the time I kind of started applying, my choices, were limited, but at the same time, I'm like, I really need to see if I can have something that can allow me any extra time as possible to
Right.
be able to practice. I took my horn. I mean, even though I was way busier than what I thought I would be, and exhausted from teaching elementary, all that energy, right? That you have
Mm-hmm.
to keep up
Yep.
constantly. I would take my horn with me and I would practice there at school all the time. So when it came time again, I applied, I got in, I was so excited. And then, it actually kind of worked out because I was able to get a very good scholarship that because when certain people are already using those scholarships, they're not available again up until
Mm-hmm.
when those people leave, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what's interesting is that if I would have gone in when I wanted to, I could have gotten accepted, but I probably wouldn't have gotten any kind of funding. But
Ah.
because I waited, because I had to wait, but because I kind of was doing that, um, yeah, I was able to finally get that aid that helped me. So I taught the year, elementary, and then I went for my master's. I finished that straight through. I spoke with Pat and I said, I think it's different when you're in your undergrad because you're there for like 4+ years for some
Right.
people, and
Right.
and then but for masters it was just it went by so fast, and I was just like,
It
I'm
does.
not
Yeah.
done yet. I said there's still so much more that I want to learn from you. I was
Mm-hmm.
like, I'm just not done yet. I was like, can I please stay for my DMA? Sometimes we don't want, like, oh, go out and go and
Mm-hmm.
study with people, but I was just like, I'm not done with you yet.
Eh.
so 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 I applied and I was able to stay for the DMA. And then this is around the time where maybe life things started to
Mm-hmm.
happen because I'm in school for a long time already now, and I'm thinking, oh, yeah, I either have to take a break, so take a break to work or take a break, for mental reasons, just a break,
Mm-hmm.
a break in that kind of sense.
Mm-hmm.
So even though the DMA typically takes 3, me and Pat laugh about this now, but it took me like 6. But that's because I did a year. Like my first year was good, and then I had this kind of weird moment where I was like, I don't know why, and my memory is horrible. I don't know why I looked, but I was just like, hey, San Francisco Conservatory has this year program where you can do, performance type of training. I'm going to apply for that. I didn't
Mm-hmm.
think I would get in, and I did. And I was just like, uh-oh, I have this weird kind of decision to make. And though I knew it was going to end badly, I had to go, right? And short version is I only lasted in San Francisco at the conservatory about 2 or 3 months until, finances and things became an issue and I had to leave. But I took advantage of it and I learned so much from Bob Ward and,
Mm-hmm.
the other faculty there within my time. So, but because of that kind of pause that I took, I wasn't ready to go back to UT for the
Mm-hmm.
DMA. So I had to try to replenish funds and things like that. So my husband's from Chicago, so we went to Chicago and we were able to stay with his family and just work. So I was walking dogs and I was trying to get in the scene there. I won an audition with the Beloit Janesville
Yeah.
Symphony
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
so I kind of barely started to try to grow some roots there and to try to get, my funds back. And then I started getting emails from the school like, when are you coming back?
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, oh, I'm not ready. But so so I was like, okay, I guess we're going back. So we were maybe like 6 months in Chicago, and then we had to come back. But I knew I had to keep working full time and kind of be a part-time student.
Mm-hmm.
So I was lucky enough. There's a music store in Austin called Straight Music, and I was able to get a full-time job as a road rep. So what that means is that there's lots of us because the area is so big, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
so I was zoned south of Austin and cities south of Austin, and then
Mm-hmm.
I had a van, I had my own it was a work phone, I had all these things, and I would go to these schools and help them out with repairs, with anything they needed from the store. So I was doing that while taking like one or two classes at a time,
Right.
trying to finish,
That's that
my year.
driving thing we were talking about. What good like
Yeah, it
future
started.
training for like taking students to workshops and gigging and that kind of thing.
I'm all about, exploring, especially, living in Austin. I learned very quickly about finding those back roads and
Traffic is nuts.
because
Yep.
you wanted to stay away from 35, stay away from 35. So
Right.
I just kind of would figure out these back ways in order to get to where I needed to be in a timely manner. But yeah, so I did that. And then what's funny is that one of the schools, because I would have to go to San Marcos, which is like an hour, maybe an hour and a half south from Austin. That
Mm-hmm.
was one of my schools because I was zoned south of Austin as well. So it was San Marcos Baptist Academy. And while I was there visiting, the director there told me, he's like, hey, if I ask them to do an assistant band director position, would you come and help me help me and do it? And I'm just like, well, um yeah, I'm still a student. I was like, if there's any way that I could still try to,
Mm-hmm.
if I'm allowed to do that, to leave during certain times to go and do my school, go do my class, and then come back. And he's like, yeah, yeah. I think he just really needed help at the time. So I'm like, yeah, sure, we'll do it. So what's funny is I was able to knock out that middle school and high school experience because since it was a private, Baptist Academy, it was
Mm-hmm.
both middle school and high school at the same time. So, but super tiny, and they had almost no. I think during the time I was there, they had maybe one horn player, so it was
Mm.
we spent a lot of time playing trombone during that time. But yeah, so I was finally able to finish, and right when I finished was when um I I got my job here, and again, my path here has taken lots of like I'm the what do you say where you start at the bottom and you kind of work your way
Sure.
work your
Yeah.
way up.
Yeah.
So I started as a part-time, lecturer because I was still living in Austin. So my
Mm-hmm.
first, I think I was here like 4 or 5 years. I started working here before, like, but I didn't live here yet. I was still living in Austin, so I would commute once a week for like that many years.
Wow. How
Yeah,
far of a drive?
it was like 4 and a half.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, I know I have problems. But it's just what had to be done. And
Right.
I think part of my thing is that I keep thinking that there's a reason that I have to do this, and that it's going to work out in the end, and it finally did.
Mm-hmm.
It took like 6 7 years, but it finally did. And during the time that the pandemic happened was when they finally had opened up, the the position here as a full-time
Mm-hmm.
tenure track. And so the only thing was that I had to go up for it just like everybody else,
Right.
So
Yeah.
that was hard because the thought of possibly, losing everything that I had worked really hard to build.
Right.
And so that was scary, but I'm happy that it ended up the way that I hoped that it would. And so this fall will be my 10-year, anniversary from when I first started working here, because I started
Uh-huh.
working in 2014. So I'm just like, wow, it's been 10 years and it's been a
Isn't that
journey.
amazing? Isn't that amazing? Yeah.
Yes.
What an incredible set of experiences to one to draw upon, and then like it's kind of like you've experienced all those things, and that what a toolbox to have when students come to you with, I don't know, and it's like, well, hey, I've been there, I've done that, and it
Yeah.
will be okay. And that's honestly, that's a lot of times what students need to hear is it's going to be okay. It might not be okay in the way that you want it to be or that you think it should be, but it'll work out at some point.
Yeah. And, and it's funny because, of course, some of them will say, like, oh, I can't because I have to work, or I can't because I have to do this. I'm like, I'm sorry, but I'm not the right person to give those excuses to, because when I, like, the whole time from undergrad all the way up until even when I was here, like, I never had just one job. Like,
Hmm.
I was a hustler, and I
Hmm.
I was working triple duty sometimes, but again, you just have to keep that end goal in mind,
Hmm.
and being persistent is, I think I could have sworn, I was trying to look back and think back, but while I was at Kingsville, I think one of the scholarships that I got was actually called the Persistence Scholarship. So I was like,
That's perfect. Yeah,
it was foretold.
that's perfect.
but but um but yeah, so I'm kind of that. I try to be that model for them. Like, it is possible. Like, yes, it's hard. It's not, not all of us can handle that, but it is possible to be able
Hmm.
to do all those things and still be, successful in what you're doing.
Hmm.
Um,
Well, and I
but
imagine it carries much more weight with your students when you've lived it, and it's like,
right.
I'm proof that it pays off and that it can be possible. So, yeah, because always, the I find the older I get, the less I look anything like the students look, and so it's probably difficult to sort of explain to them how you get from being a student, because we were all students at one point, to wherever it is that you are now. But having that story that you can tell and that they can be inspired by, that sounds like an incredible thing.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's funny because, when I first started, uh or I guess I think within my path, and it's hard to say whether the reason why I thought this particular way was because things weren't so easy, or but I always kind of felt this, we call it imposter syndrome. Like, I didn't really
Hmm.
know where I belonged, and that it was the same as a student, and then it was kind of the same when I first started teaching here, because you know what you want to do, but sometimes you don't really see how you fit in, and
Hmm.
trying so that's something that still kind of that still is there, but at the same time, I try to be very positive, and trust that this is where I'm supposed to be.
Hmm.
And it's kind of moments like this where you don't really know that you're doing something positive, or that it's, affecting people in a positive way, until you're kind of, when you asked me to do this, I was like, oh, I feel seen. And then, and it was the same thing when we were, at Mid South. The studio did so great, and then I had, so many people, coming up to us and saying, like, wow, like, all these great things, and I'm like, we feel seen. you know and it's
Yeah,
kind of
yeah.
what, it's yeah, and it's hard also, just we're not used to that as well, just getting, compliments sometimes, and but just to know that we're in the right track,
Yes,
and
yeah,
it
exactly.
makes us all feel seen.
Yeah, well, and 100%, 1,000%. Um, I was going to mention, and I should mention that you gave a really great presentation last year in Montreal at which one was it? IHS 55, because we're about to be in IHS 56. Get my numbers mixed up sometimes. But I really thought, your ideas about building culture in a horn studio and recruiting and all that stuff, those are some really, really excellent ideas that would be useful to, of course, teachers starting out, but even people in mid-career or people that have been doing it a long time. So I was just going to say bravo on that. That was a really great presentation.
Thank you. Yeah. Something that I'm very adamant about, and from the very beginning, is having this kind of we us type of culture.
Mm-hmm.
It was and never is ever about me. It was always like we need to do this, and it's us type of thing. And
Mm-hmm.
even when there's a certain decision that has to be made, I make it a part of the whole studio needs to be involved. So when we're trying
Mm-hmm.
to decide when we're trying to decide what we want to do, it's a collaborative thing, and that I think is something that they appreciate. But
Mm-hmm.
me too, like I wouldn't be able to do or be where I'm at now without every single person that has been a part of this studio. Um, but yeah, so they know that it's important for us to have those things in mind, like what is our mission, what are we
Mm-hmm.
trying to prove to ourselves, but also to the horn community. We're having this conversation at Mid South, where I think sometimes it's a shock when we go and we play and we present, and it's good that everyone's like, wow, UTRGV, but at the same time, it's like it shouldn't be that much of a shock. Like we do great things here too, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So
exactly.
so
Yeah.
we it's just that's really important to us, that we might not be a big name or a big school, but we can do big things too. And
Mm-hmm.
that's very, very important for us to remember, as well as for others to remember when they hear us and see us perform as well.
Right. And I one of the things I really enjoyed about your presentation was there's an element of you don't take yourself too seriously. You take what you do really seriously, like, you're serious about music and building the horn studio and all of that. But there was some lighthearted moments, and it sounds like you keep your students engaged, and I really appreciated that, because um it's easy, especially with how hard being an educator at any level is these days. It's just it's there's plenty of other harder jobs. I'm not complaining at all. There's plenty of
Right.
other harder jobs, but it's easy to get discouraged. It's easy to get, down, and we don't want to let the students necessarily feel that either. We want to kind of keep them motivated. And it sounds like you had some really good ideas for doing that.
Yeah, I think it's again, and it's something that we all do, because they have to help me with it too. I'm not all sunshine and rainbows all the time either. You know what I mean? But
Right.
but it helps when I have that conversation with a student, that helps to remind me, even like, why am I here, and why
Hmm.
do I do this, and it helps us all to do that and to think about that. But yeah, I just thought we need to do things, even non-music sometimes,
Hmm.
that can help to, like, for example, we do like our little semester things, and that's actually probably one of my most favorite things to see on Facebook or Instagram, when I see other studios doing more, team building type of things,
Hmm.
or birthday celebrations. Like, I'm all, I just think it's different when it's your birthday, and that's like, it's your day, like, you better feel special. I'm gonna make you feel special. So so even though they feel super awkward, I just like try to make it so that they know that they're seen and they're special, and that
Hmm.
I appreciate everything that they are. And yeah, so we have our, nice traditions that have morphed over time. It started so simple, and then it maybe became more violent with the with the cupcake in the face and the pie in the face. But again, it's all in good fun. But no, it's just, I think it's really great to have those things. And of course, we do incorporate a lot of things that are going to help us in the career. Um, I knew very early on. Again, I had kind of mentioned it before, how I didn't feel that comfortable or have that much experience with teaching while I was a student.
Hmm.
Um, So I knew that that was something that needed to be part of what we do. So and that first stemmed out from so when we in the beginning when I first started teaching here, it was two different campuses. So there
Mm-hmm.
was one at Brownsville, UT Brownsville, and then there was one in Edinburgh, UT Pan American, and then those merged and they became, UT Rio Grande Valley.
Mm-hmm.
So when that merge happened, luckily inherited that studio. So, but I had this kind of like, whoa, I have some students at this age or this level, and then some over here at this level. So I
Mm-hmm.
thought, what great thing to kind of pair them up, and I try to keep it that way where I have maybe a older with a newer or somebody more that's been in the studio a little bit longer, help those newer ones that help them get acclimated to not
Mm-hmm.
only how college life, but also just how I like to do things so that it
Right.
can help.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's almost me also, enlisting the help. Like, please, I need the help. Like we need this. We in order for us to not have those moments where it backtracks. Like we all need to be in it together. Um, so yeah, so I aside from their lessons with me, I have them. So I put them in pairs, and then they have to meet with each other at least for a half an hour, but where they're switching roles. So
Mm-hmm.
I have them do it to where they take turn where one's teacher, one student, and then they switch their roles, and then so that they get that experience of being able to use their words as
Right.
a
Right.
teacher and explain things, and then of course they can give each other feedback on how it was. What kind of things can they improve upon? Like, oh, maybe you didn't say this as clearly as you should have,
Mm-hmm.
or whatever. But it's just giving them that kind of experience, since it's not as easy for us to kind of go out and teach those things while they're students, especially. So
Right. Yeah. Well, that's an awesome idea. I'm going to steal that if that's okay.
go for it. No, I think like I think that helped a lot, and it still does with for them to feel comfortable. One of the other things is yes, the majority of the students here are ed, but that doesn't mean that they're not gonna be uh, performers and understand that life as well.
Mm-hmm.
Just like the ones that are, performers, they're gonna know and they need to know what it's like to teach and to be able to
Right.
use words and to explain, because it's crucial. So that's why I always tell them you're gonna be everything, and that's
Yep.
what's gonna make your brand will be a lot better if you're more, versatile in how you think and how you're able to approach things, and you have to adapt.
Yeah.
So when they have to use their words and they have to learn, something I say a lot is that, they have to be very mindful as a teacher, mindful as a performer. Um, and being able to express, you can't just say, oh, that sounded bad. Well, what, like, be specific,
Right.
what
Yep.
was it? And because
Yeah. You can't just say do
you
better.
can't just tell a kid, wow, that was awful. I mean, tell them it was awful, but tell them why.
Right. Right.
I think it's just important. The more they can express, the better off it'll be. And also, I started to become, I wasn't comfortable with teaching in the beginning, but once I started to do it more, I noticed how that started to affect, my playing. And I'm like, wow,
Mm-hmm.
I'm way more mindful and I'm listening, and I'm able to, navigate certain things, from a performance standpoint, because I'm thinking of things as a teacher.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Exactly.
I
Yep.
so I think it's special, and when they finally see that it can correlate, and that it doesn't have to be like, oh, I'm just gonna do this, or I'm just gonna do this. It's like,
Right. It's
no,
such a light bulb moment. Yeah. Yeah.
exactly, yeah.
Yeah. Monica, this time has flown by. This has been an awesome conversation. I just want to, I usually wrap up these interviews by mentioning the IHS, but with you, it's special because you are on the IHS Advisory Council, which is, for people that don't know, that is the leadership group, the governing body that makes the policies and that, decides what the overall direction of the International Horn Society is. And if you want to maybe talk a little bit about what your experience with the IHS has been, and it's obviously it's important to you, or you wouldn't be on the advisory council, but maybe just share a little bit about that.
Right. Again, this is one of those full circle type of, moments because you realize like, wow, like I'm now a part of what I looked up to,
Hmm.
so to be able to be in, that position to see how things are from more of, like an inside, perspective, like, wow, this is how things are
Hmm.
run, and how certain things, have to be decided, how even something so simple, can determine the future and the path
Hmm.
of, the society as a whole. So that is, I'm very honored to be able to be a part of this group, to be able to do that. And I think something important that I there's lots of phases, and the one of the last phases that we have, as a either as a student or as a teacher, is when we have to give back. I was like, so
Hmm.
I'm in that give back phase where I'm trying to realize and figure out how can I, try to provide as much of a service to the goals and the mission of the Horn Society, but also to try to keep it alive, and
Right.
and to try to do my part for that. And yeah, I'm very honored to do that. And I hope to be able to continue that as long as I can.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. This has been an awesome conversation.
Thank you so much. It really was an honor for me.
Likewise.